And that includes solar. And as a representative of Arizona, I know the potential for solar. Thousands and thousands of great-paying, green-collar jobs here to this state. I've met with folks in the solar industry in Arizona. I have their endorsement.
But I mean, that's just one thing. I mean,
it's one component, but boy, if you represent Arizona, you should be pushing hard for that component. And John, following Republican Party leadership, like he's done 98% of the time, says it's his duty to do so, has voted consistently, not only against solar, but against drilling as well.
I just heard the Congressman chuckling in the background. I feel compelled to bring him into this. What your thoughts on that?
I voted to create the very solar tax credit that was used by Bob to put solar units on his roof. I voted to create the commercial solar tax credit. I voted to extend both of those. Every time the bill for solar tax credits has passed the Congress, I've voted for it. But he says he's for drilling. Well, the United States Congress, the Congress he says needs to be changed, is controlled by the Democrats. The Democrat Party just passed an energy bill. It was a no drilling bill. It locked up, moved from temporary law
but having said that,
permanent law. Wait,
those are the Democrats there.
He's a permanent law. Yeah, right. He moved into permanent law a provision that would have locked up 88% of all of our offshore oil. The reality is his party here in Washington, which he would vote with right down the line, has been anti-energy. They just passed a bill that would lock up virtually all of our resources permanently, take them off and permanently lock them up.
Okay, so he's predicting where you're going to vote. Let's talk about where you're going to vote. What are you going to do?
That bill opened up areas in Alaska, offshore, provided for solar, provided for wind. Look, we had legislation before, the use it or lose it legislation, said that the oil companies have to drill on those 68 million acres they already have under lease or abandon them. So some wildcatter, for example, might be able to drill on them.
So John voted against it. Just want to understand, are you saying everything, when you go back to saying everything's on the table, you're willing to open up everything even beyond what that bill does?
Absolutely. We have to be able to look at every situation on a case-by-case basis. We don't have the resources to drill everywhere at once, so we have to do it sequentially. We don't have any choice. But we have to look at every opportunity. We need oil. We're not there yet with alternative energy. We need to work aggressively to get there. But we need oil. There's no question about it, Rick.
And Congressman, how do we move beyond oil? How do we get there? I mean, solar is only one small component.
Well, let's talk about we need oil. Nancy Pelosi and my opponent.
John, you're not running against Nancy Pelosi.
Hang on for a second. Let the Congressman go.
I didn't know we were interrupting each other.
Go ahead,
we were having
keep talking.
A conversation here. Look, Nancy Pelosi controls the United States Congress. Mr. Lord's first vote in this Congress will be a vote to re-elect her. Unless he's going to right now disavow that. That will not be changing Congress. Mr. Lord may not know it, but in point of fact, there are lawsuits filed by his backers blocking every single offshore lease off of all of Alaska, but also off of all of the lower 48. Lawsuits which the groups that are funding his campaign are supporting. His campaigning is getting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars from Washington politicians. Count the ads that run on TV. The DCCC is spending literally probably $1 million or $1.5 million to try to elect Mr. Lord, and then he comes back here and says he's going to vote different than his party. I don't think so. His party has been anti-oil all along. This bill was anti-oil, and the recklessness of the charges.
Congressman, we're almost out of time.
Said again. 98% of the time I vote with the party. 98% of the time I vote with the party. In point of fact, Bob Robb called that charge fundamentally false.
Okay.
I've crossed my leadership so many times. We can go on.
All right. I'm going to give you 15 seconds to respond here.
Well, he said it's his duty to support leadership, but moreover, that bill didn't contain any environmental regulations or laws. John, that's a non sequitur. That bill provided for drilling.
Actually, it did, Bob. Actually, it did. No, you're wrong. You need to read the bill. The bill said that it was reinstating and reaffirming every single current environmental law in America. I'm sorry you didn't read it.
Okay, and unfortunately, we're out of time on the energy issue. We need to move on to other things and get those pesky commercials and bills. All right, we're talking about those issues. When we come back, we're going to talk about immigration right after the break.
My concern is, when is this immigration finally going to be resolved? I mean, there's so many things about, what's going on with issues of a lot of, people being stopped, asking questions just because of, us being a little bit, on the brown side. But there needs to be a resolution in this case.
You know, it's interesting, as I watched the vice presidential debate this past week, it occurred to me that not a word was mentioned about immigration. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, when I look at both Congressman Shadegg's stance and Mr. Lord's stance, both of you want to secure the border, you want to enforce laws in the workplace, you don't want amnesty. So I need to talk about what's different between you. And Congressman, we're going to start with you first this time. Obviously, somebody's going to say you're part of the Washington establishment that hasn't been able to solve this problem. Why not? What do we do differently these next 2 years? And how do we put it back in front of the American people with all these other issues?
The extremes on both sides of this issue have made it nearly impossible to act here in Washington, and that's unfortunate. The Congress reflects the will of the people, and the nation is very polarized on this issue. Quite frankly, I have said that those that call for shipping everybody back home are unrealistic, and that's an inhumane position. I have also said that the other side of this issue, those who want to give them amnesty or citizenship, as Senator Kennedy would do, are also pushing toward an untenable position. I have written op-ed after op-ed in Arizona. I was one of the few people that have come out as a Republican and said we need a guest worker program, even though that was opposed by many Republicans in the legislature, because in Arizona, a guest worker program worked. I have a history there. Mr. Lord wasn't in Arizona when it worked, but we had the Bracero program. It enabled people to cross lawfully, to come into Arizona to work, and then to return. And
so how do we cross that problem where we haven't been able to get the two sides to come together and get this done?
Well, when I was here in leadership in Washington, chairman of the policy committee, I pushed what were called unity dinners, where I tried to bring the two parties together on that issue, bring in both extremes, and try to find middle ground. That's the hope, and unfortunately the election this year has made that impossible. I think we can find middle ground in the future if the two extremes will stop kind of taking extreme positions and polarizing the body politic.
Mr. Lord, you know, how do you solve this problem? What do you do?
I've been to the border. I visited the Tohono O'odham Nation. They have 75-mile border with Mexico, excuse me. And it's deplorable what's happening there. The land is being trashed, cars are being stolen, crime rate is way up. And they're not getting any help, and I know it's the same way all along that border. We must have comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level.
And I think John agrees with that. How do you do that?
Well, it has to happen at the federal level. We have to have the will to act. There was legislation coming down the pike in 2007. Hadn't even reached the House. And John, following party leadership, he says it's his duty to do so, worked hard to torpedo that legislation before it got to the House. Now, I know he wasn't satisfied with the legislation. I don't quibble with that. But before he even had a chance to amend it, before he had a chance to work on that legislation, he blew it out of the water. That's not good policy.
Okay, realistically,
actually, Rick,
go ahead.
Actually, Rick, I'm quite proud of what we did in that case. That was a bill that went way too far. But, you know, I've got to deal with this following party leadership. In my first term in Congress, I crossed Republican Party leadership so many times that they told me I was not going to get the committee assignment they'd promised me. Tom DeLay looked me right in the eye and said, Shadegg, you've crossed us too many times. You're not going to get that assignment. As recently as last year, 2007, the current whip of the Republican Party kicked me off of what's called the whip team because I voted against our leadership. Anybody that knows John Shadegg's record knows that John Shadegg is not a party toady. I've fought our leadership, probably more than 99% of the Republicans in Congress. Read any write-up of me in any of the national journals, and they will tell you that I